What's going on, everybody? It's your main man, the real Pat Man here, coming to you guys again with a video on my phone. I like to do business on my phone, man. I left my laptop at the house, so I'm kind of stuck with what I have. But today, man, we're gonna talk about something a little bit different, man. I know I've been preaching. You know, reconstruction of the roster, how to make money, work, and stuff like that. So I'm gonna talk to you guys about a scenario where the Falcons could potentially retain Matt Ryan and Julio Jones next year. And how they can kind of sort of negotiate around the cap to kind of facilitate this and make this work. So first and foremost, as always, we're using overthecap.com's calculator. And we're just going to go through some quick little things. Excuse me. My apologies. So first and foremost, if we're looking at the projected salary cap right now, they have it at $178 million. So they have us about $24 million over the cap. Now, this number right here is intriguing because, as you can see, they don't have the 2020 number anymore. So what they did was they just rolled over that $2 million or so, give or take, that we had for 2020 into 2021, which is the reason why it's reflecting at being over $24 million. Now, as always, there's speculation that this cap number may be closer to $195 million and potentially even a little bit higher. And a lot of that is also dependent upon what the Players Association agrees with the league in terms of how they're going to work this 17th game that they're trying to schedule. Because odds are, if they're going to have more games next year, they're going to potentially make the cap a little closer to what it is this year. That way teams aren't really struggling too much. They can still sign some guys. Players can still get paid and whatnot. And those types of things. So we're going to go through some calculations real quick and see how the Falcons can make this work. So first and foremost, with Julio Jones, regardless if he's a Falcon or not, it really has no bearings on our cap space. If you trade Julio, the Falcons only lose about a net $200,000 in cap space in terms of converting all of his salary cap into a dead cap hit. So what that means is, if you look at Julio's deal, his base salary is fully guaranteed. So if you trade him, you trade Julio along with whatever guaranteed salary he has left remaining. And because of that, the Falcons will only have to pay whatever signing bonuses, prorated bonuses, and whatnot that Julio Jones is guaranteed. All right, so regardless if he's a Falcon or not, it's not going to affect the cap space. What does that mean? That means that unless the Falcons are guaranteed to get some pretty decent amount of return on investment from Julio, i.e. maybe a first-round pick, second-round pick, 2 firsts, whatever the case may be, odds are they're probably not going to trade Julio Jones. They could still do it, but they would have to be blown away by a team willing to give up a lot of assets in return for Julio. Again, he has no variance whatsoever on the cap space. Regardless if he's here or not, it really doesn't change his numbers at all. His cap hit's either going to be what it is now or like $200,000 more if you trade the man, right? So real quick, we're just going to do routine cuts. All right, so Ricardo Allen's going to get cut. He's going to be cap casualty. James Carpenter, Allen Bailey, and Tyler Davidson, right? Just those 4 guys. Now we're over the cap $7 million, right? So again, if this number is closer to 195 million as opposed to the 178 million right now, I think it's a difference of like 17 million or something like that. Then we're already in the positive in terms of cap space, right? So we won't know really until the salary cap is actually like officially, determined by the league. That's when we'll know with how many moves the Falcons can make, right? So just from cutting those 4 guys, all right, those are older guys, vet guys. They're going to get cut. They're going to be cap casualties. We're already over the cap $7 million. So what I made mention of on Twitter is if you take and you restructure $10 million of Matt Ryan's base salary, right? So we're just going to restructure $10 million of this base salary. And I'm doing it like this just to make sure that I don't miss a couple of zeros because that happens from time to time. All right, so we're going to restructure $10 million of Matt's base salary and turn to a signing bonus. And look at that. It drops its cap hit from $44 million to $34 million, right? And then look at that. Look at what's done for us. We're still over the cap a little bit, but there's additional moves that the Falcons are going to make. All right, so one player in particular that the Falcons are going to have to make a decision on is going to be Dante Fowler Jr. Now, I'm going to say this right now. This pass rush, this defense has improved tremendously, statistically speaking. Now, if you look at standard metrics like points per game, yards per game, it's not very good, right? But if you look at DVOA, EPA and stuff like that, this defense has improved tremendously. According to Football Outsiders, right now they're playing like a top 10 defense. So what that means is there is no defensive player that you're going to draft that is going to come in here and move the needle for this defense. All right, this defense is only going to take their next additional step with coaching, right? And that includes up front, right? So, a lot of folks, want the Falcons to trade back to draft a pass rusher. I mean, it's fine, but that player, historically speaking, isn't going to come in and really move the needle for the defense unless the appropriate coach is involved, the appropriate scheme is involved and whatnot. That's the only way this defense is going to take the next step. So just remember that. So for this particular scenario, I got the Falcons actually cutting Dante Fowler Jr. Again, it's going to be hard. They're probably not going to play with a true number one edge. They can still draft a guy. Maybe they trade back and draft a guy. Who knows? We don't know what this team is going to do. But for this scenario, I have them trading Dante Fowler Jr. Cutting him, designating him as a June 1 cut. His road here is pretty rocky. He's making a bunch of money. Yeah, I just don't think the new regime is going to look at his production in conjunction with what he's getting paid and kind of deciding that makes sense. So by doing that, the Falcons have a little over $7 million in cap space. Now remember, if this number is closer to $195 million, that $7 million is, closer to like $24 million or something like that. My math is correct. Now the Falcons could make additional moves. They could 100% max restructure Grady Jarrett, a 2-time Pro Bowler. I don't think you want him to go anywhere anytime soon. And they could also max restructure Jake Matthews if they wanted to. One of the better left tackles in the league. But what I'm trying to say is the cap is really not a problem for this team if they want to roll into next year with Matt Ryan as the quarterback. I still 100% support them drafting a guy in the first round. A guy like maybe Trey Lance is, slowly creeping up to be one of my guys I'm looking for them to potentially draft if they end up at 4. Maybe even if they end up at 5, or who knows. But ideally, if you're the Falcons, you want to have flexibility with your quarterback position, especially under a new regime. If Matt Ryan does kind of have a decline next year, it's easier to move on from him in 2022. If he has a bounce back year where he's kind of putting up MVP numbers next year, that's a problem you deal with next year. Nobody cares about that this year, right? Because obviously if he's putting up those numbers, and like I say, your defense is, quote unquote, receiving better coaching, they're going to perform better. That's going to be a really good football team. Maybe that's not a Super Bowl contender, but that's definitely a playoff team. And like I say, Matt Ryan's putting up MVP numbers, because of quarterback competition or whatever the case may be, then that's a team that's going to go to the playoffs, potentially win a playoff game. And like I say, you can figure out the quarterback situation next year in 2022 at that time. But then that push comes to shove, man. Matt puts up an MVP season. I mean, if the Falcons still want to move on from him, they could trade him. I mean, you're going to get a lot in return if a Matt put up an MVP season. You know what I'm saying? He still has some trade value and whatnot. Like I said, the opposite could happen. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded about it. But there are several ways that the Falcons, if they wanted to, could 100% keep Matt and keep Julio. Julio's the biggest thing because he has no kind of effect on the cap. Whether he's on the roster or not, the difference is like $200,000, which is nothing, right? There's also several other contracts on here that could potentially be moved, you know what I'm saying, to open up additional cap. A lot of those smaller cuts You start compounding those cap savings together, you could generate a pretty decent amount of cap as well off of that. And then, like I say, hopefully if this number's closer to 195 mil or whatnot, you add 17 mil onto 23 mil, so that's what, $40 million in cap space. Plenty of money to take care of business in free agency, bring in some additional pieces as well. You do a lot of stuff with that. Even replace Dante Fowler Jr. if need be. So like I say, man, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, man. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded. I'm going to post this on YouTube. And you guys have a great day.